What's good, everybody? Do you ever look at a film's practical effects and marvel at how good they look, only to find out that they're a masterpiece of digital compositing? No? Just me? Well, maybe you need to revisit the others with Lady Macbeth and me in this, the 49th episode of Murders with Mertens. Hello, horror fan, best friends, and ghoulish knights, and welcome to the 49th episode of Murders with Mertens. I'm your host, Joe, and this is a podcast about horror, gothic horror, cosmic horror, body horror, folk horror, sci-fi horror, the horror-adjacent thrillers, the psychologically terrifying, scary films in general. Each episode, I sit down with a guest and discuss one of their favorite scary films so that we can gush about everything that makes it just so damned cool. Viewers, thank you for the support. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. It certainly helps with the engagement. If you haven't already, maybe consider subscribing to the channel if you're so inclined. It's free to do, and you look cool doing it. Audio listeners, the show is also available on podcast services around the world like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so don't forget to leave a rating when you stop by, 5 stars if you're a real one. Enough of all that housekeeping, however, as I have the distinct pleasure of introducing in her Murders with Mertens debut, Ms. Lady MacBehth herself, Beth Giles. Welcome, Beth.
Woo! What's up? Thanks for having me. I'm
Hey.
very excited.
Oh, I'm so glad that we could finally make this happen. We podcasted a couple of times before. We had the great, foursome together for Prey, which was so much fun. And,
It was amazing.
what was it? Predator 2 on Yaz's podcast. And it's always been a good time. So I'm glad I could get you on for a one-on-one with this. I think it's what had
Same.
to happen for us to discuss the film that we're about to discuss, because that just was not coming together with the group that we were trying to. Sorry, guys, we're going to do other things with you again. It'll happen. But yeah, it's just trying to juggle, 4 people with multiple time zones and different schedules and stuff is hard. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It
totally,
was hard
totally get
getting
it.
my schedule down.
Yeah, and I understand life gets in the way. It's hell, I've had a very low level of output since last fall. So I totally understand. Sometimes it's just your own, bullshit getting in the way of making stuff happen. But sometimes it's hard to pin people down. And
Yeah.
this is a show where it's just no fun without a guest. Um, so for those who don't know, who is Lady Macbeth?
Lady Macbeth used to be a pretty, avid streamer. I specialized in scary games for the most part, or playing Call of Duty with my friends. Beth is a avid D&D player, a bartender, and hopefully in the fall joining cosmetology school.
Okay. Nice, nice.
Yeah. I
Well,
love
I'm
everything alien. And those who actually do know who I am, you'll be very happy to see the wonderful mischief is still here.
yay. Looks so happy to be there too.
She's so happy. She's rolling around on my desk. I love that she used to have her own camera on my channel and everything, and people could like give her treats and stuff. So she's
Nice.
she's she's wonderful. She's my baby.
Well, she seems to be a good kitty, and that's cool. Um, yeah, I gotta say, I was very happy when you reached out last week or whenever it was, and was like, "Hey, are we ever gonna do this?" And it kind of broke me a little bit. And I was, very touched. So it was happy to hear from you. And back in like April or whatever, I had, just broke out a legal pad and I'm like, these are people that are on a podcast wish list, and definitely threw your name on there. And yeah, glad that we can make this happen. So thank you. Thank you
I
for
found
getting
it, of
back with me.
course. I found it because I was like on Instagram and I was scrolling away and I was like, I wonder what I'm tagged in. And I clicked the tag button and I saw that. And I was like, oh my God, I completely forgot about this. So I commented and I was just like, are we still on? Like this was supposed to happen. Am I
Yeah.
incorrect here?
Yeah, yeah. I'm shit at making stuff happen with this podcast. So, we're doing it now. We're doing it
We're
now.
doing it.
But yeah, we're
Past
finally doing
tense of the
this.
past.
Yes. Yeah, to that end, tonight's episode is 2001's The Others, written, directed, and scored by Alejandro Amenabar. What a fucking movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it a lot, but I'm glad that I got the 4K Blu-ray last fall when it popped on Criterion Collection because it looks gorgeous. This film holds up in so many ways. Yeah. Yeah. It's just a gorgeous film. It's
I love her.
Nicole Kidman. Throughout all my notes, I keep saying she's acting her ass off in this
Oh,
movie because
100%.
she
She almost quit.
really is.
She almost quit
Wow.
because it was so terrifying and so overwhelming for her that she actually during rehearsals, she quit and, like, eventually came back on
Oh, wow.
because it was so much. She said it was overly emotional and it was just overwhelming for her, like, getting into that character as the mom because, like,
I,
she was
I
going
could
through her
see it.
divorce and her kids and everything during that time.
Yeah. And her husband was a producer on the goddamn film.
It was the last time they ever collabed.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, and clearly Cruz has his working relationship with this dude too, because he remade his previous film as Vanilla Sky.
Yep.
Yeah, wow, interesting. There's a lot of the making of and the retrospective interviews and stuff that are on the disc for this thing are interesting. I love that this is a film written by an atheist. It's for as ultra Catholic as Grace's character is, and we'll get into it a little bit later how that gets rocked
Mhm.
pretty hard, but yeah, yeah, it's there's so much cool going on. All the little, side characters in the film are just acted to death. It's
I
you
love
get
the caretakers.
oh yeah. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
they're so good.
So
And
good.
Nicole Kidman and Christopher Eccleston just looking hot as fuck in the early aughts. They are both gorgeous human beings. And yeah, yeah, it's hell of a film. And I remember it well from the time period being, oh, hey, it's like the reverse ghost story. It's the ghost story with a twist. It got, fucking parodied in one of the scary movie movies. It, and I don't remember people necessarily having as, I guess, a reaction as in depth as you possibly could go in this film, as I'm sure we're about to. Um, but yeah, there's a lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
It's there's
I remember when it came
definitely
out. My mom and me, we loved scary movies, and I remember when this came out, I had just turned 18, had just graduated high school, um, and we rented it at Blockbuster like every Friday. We always had movies on every Friday. New ones came out. We rented this, and my dad and my whole family, they don't like scary movies, but my mom and me freaking loved them. And so late at night after everybody goes to bed, we put it on and we just sat there in the dark watching this movie. And immediately she went out and bought it because she loved it so much, and it's a staple from our scary movies. It was like Stir of Echoes and like this
oh
one and a
nice.
couple others. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I remember you had said to me last fall that you had, a pretty tight connection with this film with your mother, and thought that's so cool. Beth's gonna have so much fun stuff to say about this movie then.
She was raised Catholic. She found a connection with the movie and the mom, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I grew up Catholic. I'm just one of those agnostics, former Catholics, like incredibly lapsed Catholics. That's just like a hair's breadth away from full blown atheism at this point. But I can any media really that delves into Catholicism in any way, I've got such a strong touchstone to it. I mean, it's one of the reasons why The Exorcist continues to be one of the scariest movies to me. It's just, you know, it, there's something about all that. It just works. And
Yeah.
oof, this film, just the reactions of the children in, just their pushback to their mother and to the nanny slash housekeeper, Mrs. Mills, in certain things. Yeah, those definitely strike a chord for me for sure. Um, yeah, oof. Um, I don't want to belabor this because we had kind of a late start going, so I think we should jump into the plot here. And we kick things off with a voiceover from Nicole Kidman's Grace, telling her children the creation story that plays with the opening credits, featuring old timey drawings from looks like from children's books at first, and it's all lit by candlelight. And, I would expect that somebody seeing this movie for the very first time with no context would think that's what they are, but it's pretty clear as we go on that the sketches rather, they're probably showing us things that we were about to see. And I love movies that do that kind of thing where, it's either like opening credits for a TV show, or even the Mission Impossible films have done this a lot, where they'll have clips for the entire movie you're about to see worked into the opening credits. But yeah, that works for me. Um, Stories set on Jersey and the Channel Islands in 1945, and they're islands that are part of the UK, but Jersey's only about like 10 to 15 miles off the coast of France. It's you would think that it is part of France, but nope. Nope. And they were the only bit of the UK occupied by the Nazis during World War II. And they get into that a little bit later in the film. But, if anybody has any context for that, or is a history buff or a World War II buff, it just adds this extra layer of interest into this thing. And I know they had originally decided to, they were going to try to film this in Chile. And then it turned into, hey, maybe we'll do it in Ireland, or, they wanted someplace that felt kind of isolated in some ways. And it was shot in Spain ultimately, but, I love the location for this because, the sense of isolation just kind of makes sense from the context of all the characters in the film until you finally understand what's going on later. But yeah, yeah, it's a cool setting. I love that there's all these old historic uh, tunnels and structures created by the Nazis that are still on that island. Just a ton of brutalist concrete, but yeah, yeah, it was like this strange little detente during that occupation where they really didn't do much to the people who lived there, and vice versa. And Britain was like, we're not really going to push back because strategically it's not worth it. So they
Yeah,
just
they're
kind of
in a
let it,
little island.
yeah, they kind of let it play out, but didn't tell Germany that. So, so the Nazis all thought, oh, hey, they're going to come for us. And they never did. They just let the war play out. Um, hmm,
I do love
interesting.
with because you mentioned the candlelight and everything at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
That was actually they did that on purpose with the lighting. That's how he wanted it filmed is candlelight, 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 because it created this ambience of the entire thing of just that old timey of like just the it was gorgeous how it was
Well,
done of like
well,
the
for,
lighting of like certain sides of their faces and everything.
yeah,
Just it created this even more spooky
yeah,
than what you would do for other ones because even when they try to do candlelight in like newer films you can tell it's an artificial light like they have like flickering and everything like that and it was just like nope they
yeah.
used candles it was awesome it was great.
Yeah. It's it's funny because it's a film set in the mid 40s, but it's, a very gothic tale. And, traditionally that would be something, probably set more in Victorian times or before, right? Or at least that's what a lot of us perceive of a gothic tale. And to have no electricity ultimately in the story, it just kind of, gives it that more like, horror by gaslight kind of vibes. And well, speaking of gaslighting, we're going to get into that too. But
Ooh,
'cause there's a lot of that going on in this
Catholic
film.
what? Catholic what?
Yup. Yep. Yep. A Catholic says what? And
Mm. Oh
um,
Lord.
yeah. So we cut from this exterior shot of the manor to Grace snapping awake, screaming from a nightmare. And Kidman in this scene does her very first bit of acting her ass off. And, she finally like gets control of herself, grabs her watch from her nightstand, kind of sits up and collects herself. And you can see just so much going on with her as this happens. And she doesn't say a word. It's,
It's all on her face, and it's amazing. I
yeah,
love that. This is pre-Botox Kidman, where she actually
yeah,
can still move her face and act.
yes, yes. Yeah. She's still a lovely human being, but
Yeah.
Hollywood will get them all sooner or later. It's
I miss eyebrow movement in acting. I miss it. And like
yeah,
being able to see that because they can like it's easier with people like especially me because I'm autistic, but like being able to see like it's hard to read faces, but when they're not moving more of it, it's even more difficult. So when like you can see the reaction, see the emotion, and like that's how I learned what like emotions on the face were is the over dramatized ones on movies and TV of like moving the eyebrows and like seeing the eyes shift and everything like that. And like nowadays it's much harder to get a gauge and read on movies because there's so much Botox and everything else, they can't move their eyebrows. So, I like, her like, with her face in the beginning of that film, like, ah, the range of emotions of, like, from, like, the
yeah.
terrified to, like, okay, getting herself under control again and just, the amount of control that this character, like, puts on herself, like,
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
yeah, it's good, and we're gonna see a lot of it. It's we fade from here to a little bit of laughter and a trio approaching the house, talking about a man they once knew named Simpson. And there's this throwaway line of "I imagine he's dead like all the rest" from the man. They ring the bell, and after a moment's confusion, when Grace answers the door, she realizes, oh, they're there because of her advertisement for new servants, and she invites them in. We're introduced to Bertha Mills, Edmund Tuttle, and Lydia, who is mute. Um, Grace, kind of talks them a little bit here, and then details sleeping arrangements for them. Ed has to sleep in the fucking shed. What the hell, man?
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
love
it's a nice little cottage, but they call it the shed.
yeah.
And
Tuttle, I absolutely love that actor. I haven't seen him in, like, anything else that I can actually remember. I love him in this film. Absolutely phenomenal how he acted. And evidently, Nicole Kidman had seen him in a play and demanded
oh
that he be brought onto this film. And because like she was like absolutely obsessed with him and got him on and he knocked it out of the park. Him and Mrs. Mills. Oh, she is amazing. I love that
yeah,
actress so much. She
yeah,
everything she does, it's just she has this very calm creepiness that she can bring.
yeah.
Which is, like it's so unsettling, like, you're just like, something feels wrong about her, and she, just conveys that through the screen so freaking well, and she does it immediately, it's just, like, her face and everything, her reactions is just so calm of, like, "Mm, like, I have knowledge that you don't," like, but, like,
Oh yeah.
oh, I love her, I love her.
Yeah, and the bulk of the film is really her and Grace. It's just conversations between them or just interactions or whatever, but it's largely them
Yeah,
and then the kids, I would say, from there. But yeah, she's fantastic. And as she's talking about the sleeping arrangements, she spies Mrs. Mills noticing a layer of dust on a table. This is where we learn that the house's original servants, they all just vanished, just into thin air about a week ago.
yeah, just, like,
um
they left in the middle of the night without a word and just abandoned
right.
there, which
Yeah.
contributes to, like, the Nazis being on the island and everything.
Yeah. Well, the war's done. They're gone at
Yeah,
this point. But yeah, she just finds it truly odd. They didn't even take their salary or anything. It's they just up and disappeared. Um And this is where we see for the first time her unlocking a door to lead them to another room. She takes them into the kitchen and she starts detailing the meal schedule. Mrs. Mills asks about the master of the house, and this is where we learn that Grace's husband went off to fight in the war about 18 months ago, hasn't heard from him since it ended. And then Grace just completely changes the topic and asks, which one of you does the cooking? And this is where Mrs. Mills says that she's, sorry to hear about her husband. But Grace just repeats the question, which one of you does the cooking? And this is, yet another bit with Grace's character where from the beginning of the film, we get the sense that Grace can be very kind and cordial, but she has a very definite sense of her place in the world and the place of others in this world. So, by all means, she's going to treat you like a servant when she wants to treat you like a servant. It's yeah, it's very very upstairs downstairs Downton Abbey. It is what it is. It's yeah. And after that little bit, we go on to the next room and we get some exposition detailing what we've been seeing with the doors. No door is to be opened without the previous door being closed and locked first. There are 15 keys for 50 doors in the house. Mills is going to get her own set before too long. And, hey, don't mess with the piano. It was here when we got the house. Certainly don't let the children mess around with it. Grace gets migraines, prefers silence as much as possible. She also details how the Germans, during the war, they kept shutting down the power. So, eventually they just gave up and Grace has gone without ever since. It's, like I said earlier, it's great because that lack of electricity really lends itself to the Gothic nature of the story. It's kind of what we expect from ghost tales like this. Um,
I love the little
eh,
tidbits too of like they're inserting things and little Easter eggs throughout the
mhm.
entire film, like the migraines and things like that. Of like, oh, like, oh, God, I love it. It's so subtle and so sneaky throughout this whole freaking film.
Yep.
And like, as you and I were like talking about how a film like this was perfect for the time because nowadays with like all of our social media and everything like that and how our brains are wired for movies, we always look for like, well, the trailer said there was a twist, so let's figure it out beforehand
Yeah.
instead of just sitting and enjoying the movie, which we used to all do all the time, which was perfect for the time. I think if this movie came out nowadays, everybody would have ruined it and been like, "Oh, well, I saw it coming a mile away." Blah 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 blah. It was just, it's so good. I love the little Easter eggs throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and it certainly rewards repeat
Mhm,
viewings, that's for sure. Even just, just the conversation of the servants as they approach the house, it's like it takes on a whole new meaning.
mhm.
Um, so after, a lot of that exposition, Mrs. Mills suggests that it isn't necessary to give them the full tour. But Grace counters that they need to get a lay of the land because they're going to have a hard time seeing their way. And, just as a way of really explaining things, it's time to introduce the children. So she sends Tuttle off to tend to the garden and
I
instructs the
love
ladies.
that line where she's like, "You're the gardener, right?" He's so confused. He's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, yes, I'm the gardener."
Yeah.
That acting bit, I was just like, "Oh, that was
He,
great."
and,
It's
he,
like, I
and
just
he
watched
does a
it.
lot of that throughout the film
Mhm.
too,
Like, "Oh, yeah, this
where,
is what I'm doing."
yep. Yep. Or, he'll always take a cue from whatever Mrs. Mills is
Mhm.
saying and just reiterate. Um, yeah. Yeah. So she sends him off and she instructs the ladies to close all the curtains. And, you get a little montage of everybody throwing these big, heavy curtains across all the windows. And she leads them all upstairs with a lamp. And after this brief morning prayer, we meet Anne and Nicholas. They're both still a little sleepy, and one of them's like, "Are you going to be our new nanny?" And yeah, the kids are relatively sweet at first. It's and not that they're not sweet. It's just they got that
They remind
sister
me of
brother
Mary
energy.
Poppins. Mary Poppins,
Yeah.
the kids, they remind me very much even, like, how they look, they remind me very
Oh
much
yeah,
of kids from Mary
that makes
Poppins.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we learned that the kids are very photosensitive, and the most light they can really withstand is firelight. Otherwise, they'll break into hives and basically die. So that's a problem. Breakfast time. Um, And Anne doesn't like her toast, and Mrs. Mills thinks it's because it was made by someone new. This is a conversation that I feel we've all had with an adult at one point throughout a childhood. But, I think we kind of know better on repeat viewings why the toast doesn't necessarily taste as good any longer. Um, but yeah, the little girl wonders if the servants will return. Mrs. Mills doesn't think so. And then we get just like daddy from Nicholas. Um, yeah, poor kid. Uh, they kind of argue back and forth a little bit, and we get Anne letting slip that mummy went mad. And it's like, oh, well, first viewing of this, you're like, excuse me, what now? But uh, yeah, they don't really go into detail. It's just, and clearly Nicholas remembers something, but has forced a lot of it out of his brain. Um, and he doesn't want to talk about it, and they bicker a little bit more. And this is where Grace just kind of steps out of the shadows and shuts that shit down, telling them they need to clean their plates. And ultimately, Grace wants a word with Mrs. Mills outside. Um, yeah, it turns out that Grace's advertisement never made it to the paper. So she wants an explanation there. Um, and you see the wheels turning with Mills, figuring this out very, very quickly. She's quick on her feet, though. And she gives this.
Like she's on the floor or something.
Yeah, quite possibly. We get a thin excuse that the trio had just come by to offer their services on chance. And turns out that, yeah, they all used to work at that house years before. Um, how long ago? Who's to say? But yeah, we'll get into that later, won't we? Grace is kind of relieved. More than anything, she just kind of just hates dealing with the light, and tells Mrs. Mills that while her children, they may have some funny ideas, referencing the conversation she walked in on, uh, she's got no time for that nonsense.
They're
And
children. They make up stories. They have great
yeah,
imaginations.
yeah, we'll go with that. It's and so we get the wonderful bit when Mills parts ways with Grace and steps back into the kitchen, where Anne reiterates that the events she alluded to did indeed happen. And we kind of fade to black from there, and cut to the children studying with their mother. I think this isn't necessarily just the regular like homeschooling necessarily. This is them studying for their first communions. Um, and Nicholas is reading a passage out loud, and it's about two young Christians, whether or not they're going to deny Christ in front of a Roman and lose their heads. And Anne kind of laughs at the idea of them admitting their devotion in the face of certain death. And Grace, being extra Catholic, has some thoughts on this. Children's limbo for little liars. Um, she has Nicholas recite the details of the four hells. That's wonderful. This kid's probably like 5 or 6, right?
So
It's
healthy. So healthy for a
yeah,
toddler to read
it's
something of
it's,
that
it's
magnitude.
normal. Yeah. Um, so yeah, basically Grace pushing on them, hey, sure, they would have survived, they would have kept their heads, but in the end times, they would have spent,
Their
time,
whole
the
lives
rest of
would
their
have been
days.
damned.
Yeah, they would have been damned for all time in a lake of fire, right? And so, okay, time to give you kids another assignment. And Anne kind of protests. Well, Grace doesn't want to hear that shit, so she makes them study in separate rooms. Kids don't like that, not wanting to be left alone. They've, very much prefer each other's company. Nicholas, I think, is concerned about if they see a ghost. And I love Grace's, well, if you do see a ghost, say hello and keep studying. And she gives this little wave. It's funny. Um, So Grace gets up to take Anne to the music room and leave Nicholas there, but Nicholas asks for a kiss, and his sister just, mocks him incessantly for this.
She's
It's
5. She's so mean to her brother
I
sometimes.
know. It's that
Natural though. It's the
yeah.
hierarchy of children.
Yep. It's that typical older sibling dynamic. You're going to give your younger sibling shit for being a younger sibling. And yep,
Yeah.
I get it. I'm an only child, but I even get that.
Well,
It's,
I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest
oh, yeah.
of my older brother and sister, which was a big dynamic of, like, 7 years with my sister, 5 with my brother, and, like, oh, no, I got the same thing with the younger sibling.
Yep. So you are well aware then.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so Grace just has Anne wait outside. She gives her son the I won't always be with you all the time speech and tells him to squeeze his rosary and say an Our Father whenever he gets scared. Great advice, Mom. But that'll come back later too. So he goes on to read a passage about the traditional family structure there with his sister in another room doing the same. And we cut to Grace from here watching Tuttle rake leaves outside as she's kind of talking absentmindedly to Mrs. Mills behind her, asking her if she ever had children herself. Turns out Tuttle and Lydia were all she ever had. And Grace is a little nosy about Lydia and her condition. She asks if she was born mute. Um, and clearly not wanting to get into details, Mrs. Mills says no and just kind of excuses herself to go help Tuttle outside. Um, and this is where Grace starts hearing a child crying, and she just kind of assumes that's her son, so she runs off to see if he's okay. Uh, love the little bit there where as she's hurrying, she nearly forgets to lock the door behind her, and she races back to do it. Um, and she finally gets him, and he's fine. He's just doing
Yeah,
his reading.
working away, working away.
Yep. Yep. Being a good little student. And so she's like, oh no, it has to be Anne. So she runs off to find her, and she's just chilling in front of the fire, doing her own lesson. And when when Grace presses her, thinking it has to be her, because who else could it be, right? This is where Anne says it wasn't her, but that boy, Victor. Um, and she just kind of goes on at length about Victor at this point. He's the spoiled brat that told her they would have to leave the house, and he won't stop crying about it all. And she goes into this elaborate backstory about Victor and his family until she's like, enough, enough.
Like
And
a
she's
real
like,
kind woman, the mom and dad. Yeah.
yep, yep. She asks Anne how a boy can get in and out of a room if the door is locked. But as she gestures to the door, it's standing open. And she gasps and immediately blames the help.
The people that were outside.
Yes. Yep.
Not like she just left a door unlocked by accident and had to run back to it. Has to be the people that are so outside.
Yes, exactly. Again, the hierarchy must be maintained. Yes. Um, So, cut to the kids eating some soup and Nicholas scolding Anne for reading at the table. Um, Lydia just kind of sits in the corner, keeping watch, and of course she's tormented by Anne, the little witch that she is there. Um, because as she's reading her book, she's like, "Oh, who's gonna tell Mummy? You?" And then she kind of leers at Lydia and is like, "Or perhaps you." It's it's mean. She's mean. It's she's a little mean girl. Um,
No,
Nicholas Swan.
I would be too if I was raised by a mother like that.
I mean, yeah, it's
Most kids at that age, what is she, like 7, 8, 9?
something like that. Yeah.
That's when they start getting mean.
Yeah. Yeah. The sweetness is kind of dried up inside of them. Um so Nicholas, he wants to know if Victor is a ghost. And Anne says no, and then does her best to, frighten Nicholas about ghosts.
The
Um
white cloth and the chains.
yep.
There's always
Yep.
chains, which comes back.
Yep, you know it. It's that night, Anne wakes her brother to complain about Victor opening the curtains all night long. Uh, and Nicholas, of course, is scared, doesn't want any part of this. And at this point, Anne's just sick and tired of dealing with Victor. She wants her brother to go tell him to knock it off. She's done. She's done. It's your turn. Um, so she gets up and closes the curtains herself, but then we see the silhouette of somebody opening them back up again, and it does not look like her. But it's one of those situations with the way it's filmed. Conceivably, it could be. So she argues with Victor in a way that may or may not be her talking to herself to scare her brother. Again, with the way it's shot, it's really cool. You see her face, it's off camera. You do see her chin wagging a little bit as this other voice is coming. It's just all framed beautifully. It's buried just deep enough what's going on that yeah, it's good. Um, so Anne threatens to tell her mother if Victor won't knock it off. Nicholas tells her sister to stop making Victor's voice, and she says she's not. And then she invites Victor to touch Nick's cheek to prove he's real. And
So mean.
we get this arm with a tiny little hand, and the arm is clad in pajamas that are clearly not hers, reaching in towards Nicholas's cheek. And he screams bloody murder when he makes contact. And Grace comes rushing in, and she's absolutely had it with Anne. Cut to like the next day's punishment, where Anne's being forced to stand and read from the Bible. Um, she gets done with the passage and thinks she's done, but her mother has more lined up for her, wanting her to ask the Virgin Mary for forgiveness. And Anne refuses to do so. Again, she's at that age where, finally she's developing like a sense of justice,
And
right? Like,
thinking.
yep, exactly. Like,
She's thinking
why
for
would,
herself.
yeah, why would I ever ask for forgiveness for something I didn't do? Right. And yeah, she's pressing the issue that Victor was in the room and she wasn't lying about it. Um, she also, in this moment, going back to the questioning, confronts her mother about limbo only being for unbaptized children
Oh,
because
I love
she
that.
actually looked it up.
I love
So
that.
there.
Oh, that was such a brilliant point too, because like her mom's trying to like fear monger and be like, limbo's for lying children and this and this and this, and you're gonna like terrifying her to like do her own will and things like that. She's like,
Mhm.
actually, no, I looked it up. It's for babies that are not baptized, and I've been baptized, so suck it.
Yep. And well, actually is her mother. It's great. It's
It was good. I love that.
yeah. And I love as soon as this happens, we get Grace's face, but the fury is felt from off screen as we
Mhm.
just see the continued punishment then of Anne being forced to read from the Bible out loud. And we get Mrs. Mills coming out of the kitchen with a tea tray, and they kind of pause and share a look, and Mills continues on. Grace is working on her embroidery in another room, and as Mrs. Mills is pouring tea for her, she kind of confronts her about the punishment, and she's like, "It's been 3 days. Seriously, is this going to keep going?" And yeah, I mean, Grace wants to keep it up until Anne learns to swallow her pride and ask for forgiveness. Um, and again, knowing that this film is made by an atheist really says a lot about the story and why people turn away from organized religion. But we'll probably get into that a little bit more. It's because it gets worse. It's oh God, yes, it
This one
gets
can
worse.
definitely be triggering, I would say, for those who have dealt with a hyper-religious family
Oh
or
yeah.
were raised in that way and like seeing the punishments because I was actually punished in almost the exact same way. I used to have to copy out and write
Oh,
down things in like pages. Like my mom had like did an entire like encyclopedia of the Bible type thing. We had like books and books of these, and when I got in trouble, I had to write them out word for word. She never
Oh,
read them, which was irritating. And I was just like, why am I writing them if we're not going to read them? Like, but I remember spending hours doing this and just being so resentful for it. Of just like,
yeah. It
ugh.
often has the opposite effect, doesn't
Oh,
it?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, God.
I'm swearing
Grace.
pagan now.
And who would blame you, honestly?
Other gods and goddesses, much more loving and forgiving.
Yeah. Yeah. I can definitely see that. Um, We also get Grace complaining to Mrs. Mills in this scene about Lydia running around upstairs, telling her to knock it off because she doesn't want another migraine. We and Grace hear more noise from the floor above, and we see like the chandelier jiggling a
Mhm.
little bit and everything. And Grace calls out, for Lydia to cool her jets. Um, and she happens to get up in this moment and she looks through the window as she does so and sees Mrs. Mills talking to Lydia outside the window. And Grace looks up at the ceiling in fear, realizing, oh crap, it's not her. Yes. So she asks her daughter on the stairs, what's going on up there? And she says, nothing. She's only reading. I love the look on her face too, because she's like, I have stuff that I could tell you, but you don't want to hear it because you think it's all lies. You've told me, and she does basically say as much a moment later, hey, I don't know what to do at this point because I'm telling you the truth. You're telling me I'm lying. I don't know what to say to you anymore. But the self-satisfied look on her face, it's so good. That little shit. She's such a little shit, and I love her for it.
Actress. She's such
Yeah.
the little boy in her. I've got to give credit where credit is due. Of just like they did such a good job. Evidently, the director, to get them in the mood of for like the scary scenes, would like randomly play scary music, like to freak them out to get them in that mindset. I think it's
Yep.
brilliant. It's
Oh,
brilliant.
that works. Well, finally, Anne relents and tells her that, the people that ran up the stairs, they went into the junk room at the end of the hall. And Grace looks at it and you can see daylight coming from around the door, between the door jamb and the door there. And Grace enters the room. Of course, first letting a little bit too much light in, and her daughter like, hey, mom, the fucking light. Yo, and, Grace kind of pauses and then quickly enters the room and shuts the door behind her. And of course, there's tons of objects throughout this room that are all covered with white sheets and they're all roughly human height.
This scene
Eh,
was actually terrifying for me when
Yeah.
I remember this, and I'm just sitting on the edge of my, like, chair, like, wrapped up in a blanket with my mom, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god." One thing that terrifies me more than anything is, like, in video games or movies is mannequins, life-size mannequins,
Mm.
and or statues and sheets and things like that, because you never know where they're gonna move, you don't know which one's which, and you can't ever tell. In like the demo for Resident Evil 7, they did the same thing with the mannequins in Hogwarts
Yeah.
Legacy and that one special like chest level, like the mannequins that would like you turn around and they're freaking there. And they do the same thing with this scene with those sheets and the statues. Mm.
Or like the scene at the auction house with the mirror in early on in Oculus. Um, yep, yep, they do that well there as well. Oh, it's good stuff. Yeah, it's creepy. It's sufficiently creepy. Yes. She kind of timidly steps into the center of the room and hears breathing behind her, and then whispered voices with finally a shh. She's watching us, and then there's this little beat, and then there's gasping and other noises all around her, and she backs into the hand of this statue of Jesus that kind of gooses her, and at that point she whips around and starts ripping sheets down off of everything, kind of searching for the source of the voices, until finally she uncovers this mirror and sees first her own crazed reflection. And Kidman's got like the best do, this mid 40s,
It's
you know,
beautiful.
Oh yeah, just beautiful, beautiful hair, and it's a little like crazed looking in this scene. Like you're kind of a mad woman here, and then beyond herself, she notices the open door to the room closing behind her. And she hurries out, and Anne tells her, "Hey, they just went past around the stairs. Didn't you see them?" And the voices all start scattering, and Anne's gesturing everywhere, telling her mother, they say the house is theirs, and they're going to take the curtains down too. And yeah, it's again little self-satisfied, but not quite so much, because I think the daughter, Anne, I think she's starting to get a little concerned about the situation as well at this point. Especially with the mention of the curtains, because, well, the whole sunlight thing, not so good for her and her brother.
Which is a
And yeah,
natural condition too.
it
It affects
is.
about 1,000 people in the world at a time.
Yeah.
But yeah, they'll have burns and hives, and
Yeah.
it's like
I
allergic
remember
reaction.
as like a teen seeing like on 2020 or something like that,
Mhm.
a news report about little kids with this, and basically having to live their lives at night and sleep throughout the day, and got to live that vampire lifestyle as one of those kids. It's, yeah,
I
no
wonder if
joke.
that actually fed into like the vampire mythology and everything like that. Way
Could
back
be.
then, of like kids that actually had that, or adults that had that, of like they touched the sun and they would get burned, and ooh, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
So I can't remember if the boxes that Grace finds happened before this or after this.
It's after.
Okay, okay.
Yep. But we cut to Grace freaking out in front of Mrs. Mills. Um, and I love how Mills tells her to calm down. And there's nothing like telling someone who's getting ramped up to calm down. It's not the best idea in the world. There's more tactful ways of getting somebody to chill that won't continue to up that situation.
It's like you're being emotional right now.
Yeah.
Danger zone.
Ooh, yeah,
Danger
please
zone.
don't tell me that while I'm already mad as hell. Um, so yeah, Grace, she's pissed that she got through the entire occupation without a single Nazi entering the house, but now there's somebody there. And yeah, Mrs. Mills blames the floorboards and the plumbing. Grace isn't having it. It's like, no, it's not any of that. There are people here.
Which
And this,
which cracks me up though, like with Grace and things like that. Because like she's thinking so rationally all the freaking time, rationally. Um, it makes me laugh because like Catholicism, they do believe in demons and things like that. And like why wouldn't her brain rationalize that and everything like that? It just drove me crazy if she was like one spectrum of Catholicism of like, no, 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 like rationally, 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 versus like the other side. And I never understood why she did that.
I don't know. The period of Catholicism from the 20th century was a lot more not into like the more mystical nature of Christianity. Ghosts really weren't a thing that would be discussed. It's um you know I think a little bit more toned down from probably times past. But yeah, I can see where you're getting at it, that somebody so steeped in the lore, let's say. um yeah, and again, this is Mills, in the early stages of her gaslighting
Oh,
of
so much
uh
gaslighting in this movie.
yeah, it's just the floorboards, it's just the plumbing, it's just clanging pipes, it's nothing.
An old
Yeah.
house. It's an old house. Old houses make noise.
Yeah. And this is where Anne gets her mother's attention with a drawing of the people she's been seeing. And God, what's that creepy old lady?
Oh my god, that's
And
exactly what
then,
I was thinking. The creepy old lady.
and also, Grace is like, well, what are these numbers? What do they mean? And Anne's like, well, the mother and father she's seen twice. She's seen Victor 5 times. And then the camera moves across the page and you see she's seen the creepy old lady 14 fucking times. And the music wants to accentuate this in this scene at this point, too. Um, Alejandro, good on you. You understand how to score a horror film. Um, oh, he's such a wonderful triple threat for this movie. It's great.
Yes, he did such a great freaking job.
Oh yeah. It's I don't know if he had a huge background in music or what, but holy shit. It's I need to dig more into the special features on this thing. Just because they're interesting. It's god, so much cool shit.
I wish he
Uh
would do more movies for America, because literally this was like, besides Vanilla Sky, he did a bunch of others, but nothing for here, and I really wish he would.
yeah. It's this movie came out the same year as The Devil's Backbone, and it was the highest grossing film in Spain at that point. I think it made something like $24 million. It won Best Picture at the equivalent of their Oscars. It's yeah, this did well for him. Um and oh, shout out to The Devil's Backbone. I love that movie too. It's so good. There's something about little kids and ghost stories that just work so
Mhm.
well together. Um, Especially period piece, little
Dude,
kids and ghost stories.
The Orphanage?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a great one too.
Oh, with the kid in the wall.
Yeah.
I never saw
Oh,
that coming. I never saw that coming.
yeah, it's sad how that played out. It's so sad.
I watched that one with
Um,
my mom too.
yeah,
Rightfully.
that's one that I definitely got to through back in the day, Blockbuster's version of the Netflix
Yep.
subscription service with the discs. Yeah. Yep.
Mm.
Good stuff. That and all those After Dark Horror Fest films. Good stuff. Let's see here. Grace commands Mrs. Mills to grab Tuttle so that they can search the house, and Grace consoles her little boy at this point. And while they're doing their looking around, Anne is going to make things worse by hyping up the creepy old lady, saying she asks her questions and tells her to come with her. And Victor says that she's a witch. Grace grabs a shotgun out of a trunk because it's go time. And we get a montage of light being let into rooms as they search the house. Um,
I do
eh,
appreciate Grace being on point with that gun though, of like, yeah, no, we're gonna protect our house. Like, I gotta
yeah.
commend a mom for doing that. Of like immediate, like, nope, this is what's going on.
Oh, and we know for sure that she knows her way around that shotgun pretty well.
Yeah. Hmm.
But ultimately, yeah, her point is we're going to open up all these fucking curtains so that there's no dark corners and nobody can be hiding. So they've got, basically Mrs. Mills and the children hiding out in an interior room on their own then so that the kids are safe from the light. Um, and we during all of this we get this really masterful shot in the rewatch for this podcast. I definitely noticed this where Grace enters this dark room with a lamp and she sets it down and over her shoulder there's a spectral face, and when she opens up the curtains it's revealed that it's a painting, but it looks so real and human before she lets the daylight in. It's so
Oh,
good.
so creepy. So creepy.
It's
Jesus
just
Christ.
it kind of looks like the director, actually. I don't know if you've ever seen the guy, but
That
but
actually might
I
be one of the trivias on IMDb, if I remember correctly. It
oh
is.
really?
It is. Hold on. I'm such a freaking trivia slut. You know this. Um, I think you're correct. And it was the director.
Okay. Well, that makes perfect sense then.
Yeah.
Um yeah. So yeah, she bends down to look at this dust-covered portrait of some of the house's former occupants, and we cut to Nicholas wondering aloud if the people are ghosts of people who once lived there before. And counters that they aren't. Ghosts wear white sheets and carry chains and go woo. And Mrs. Mills chides her, telling her she shouldn't make up such stories. And Anne's like, nope, she reads them in books. And I love this
Charles
back and
Dickens.
forth here. Yeah, yeah.
They allude that she read Charles Dickens. with
Yeah.
Dickens with
The
the
chains
chains.
and everything. Yep. Yep. It makes sense. It's a Christmas story all over again here. Um, let's see here. Or Christmas Carol, rather. Christmas Story is a very different movie. That had, huh?
The bunny.
You'll shoot your eye out. Yes.
Oh no,
Oh, what a
you'll
classic.
shoot your yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Anne says she
Get
reads
those
about them in
stories.
books. Yeah, yeah. Mill says that she shouldn't believe everything she reads in books, and Anne, just whip smart kid here, counters that her mother expects him to believe everything written in the Bible. Boom,
Boom. Mic
mic
drop.
drop,
Mic drop.
right there. Yup, yup. This kid. Anne doesn't believe quite everything from the Bible. Shows that she and her brother actually have a healthy dose of skepticism. There's the funny thing about doves and how they just, they shit on the windows.
Yes,
They're
that's
not.
my favorite line of like doves are supposed to be this and this and this. And they were like, I don't like doves. They keep pooping on our windows. And I'm like, I love it. That's a great line from the little boy. So well.
Yeah, yeah. And I love his scrunched up face when he says it too.
Mhm.
Um, let's see here. Meanwhile, Grace is comparing Anne's drawing to the old pictures that she found in this trunk. Um, nothing's really coming up, but ultimately she comes upon this album of postmortem photography,
Which was
which
a thing.
it was very much a thing.
Creepy,
Still is a
creepy
thing in
thing.
some. Oh yeah, it
Oh
was
yeah, there's still
definitely. Yeah, in like the UK and
England.
America, it was very much more of a
Yeah,
Victorian thing.
yeah.
But
In other cultures, they actually still have the bodies mummified, basically. They bring them out yearly or whatever
yeah,
to remember them, and they have dinner with them, and it's mm, as a Westerner, I find it very creepy. But I understand it and I
oh
respect
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I get it. It's a lot of this came out of the beginnings of photography with the daguerreotype and all that stuff. It was a new thing, and
Most
it
of
was
it's
kind
still for the photos,
yeah,
which was
yep,
a big thing. So,
yep. So ultimately, she gets startled by Mrs. Mills here announcing that the search has found no one. And Grace shows her the album. And she's, both kind of horrified and transfixed by it. She can't stop turning the pages. And, what's the line from Mills here that I like? Grief over the death of a loved one can lead people to do the strangest things.
oh yeah.
Mm.
Everything that comes out of
Mm.
Mill's face is like
Mm.
double meaning. Every single thing out of her mouth is a double meaning. Like I loved rewatching this again and being like, "Oh, oh, okay, Mills. I see." Like it she's trying to get Grace to think throughout this whole film and Grace is just not getting it. Doesn't she gets it. She doesn't want to get it.
Yep.
Um Also the director, he was in one of those photos, not the painting. So with the photo of
Gotcha.
the 3 men, the guy with the mustache on the that was the director.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I love how Mills explained to her, she's like, "Well, they're all sleeping, it's so weird, that's so weird." Grace is like, "They're all sleeping," and Mills is like, "They're dead. They're all dead in these, like, every single one of them. These are dead photos." And Grace was just like, "Oh," like, shocked to her core.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. She says, I want you to get rid of this thing. And she kind of does, not really. But later on that night, Grace is there by the fire. And she's sitting there with the shotgun next to her. And Mills is like way off on the other side of the room, just sitting in the dark. And it's so weird that Grace has to like invite her over to the fire. Um, and she asks the older woman about her previous employ at the house. And at the end, Mrs. Mills says it was only the three of them left. And then even they left due to the TB outbreak. Because, tuberculosis, consumption, that used to be definitely more of a thing. Um, but
Red Dead
yeah.
Red Dead
So-
Redemption 2.
yeah, yeah. Tombstone.
Eh,
Yep.
Doc Holliday, yep,
Yep.
or
I'm your
even,
Huckleberry.
and I mean, Nicole Kidman should be very well versed in tuberculosis, Moulin Rouge.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. um, but yeah. Grace asks if that was when Lydia became mute, and Mills says she thinks so. Again, something that on retrospect definitely makes sense. Mrs. Mills heads upstairs for the night, and I'm in love with the shot of her climbing the stairs.
That stairwell
It's
is so gorgeous.
just the way it's framed, everything's
Yes.
symmetrical, the way it's lit. It's almost like her ascending to heaven or something like that. It's cool. It's also interesting that there are no handrails in that stairwell at all. It's weird. I know it's to an attic and everything, but still, if this were a workplace, O should have a fucking field day. It's Uh, but instead it's a old manor in
They
the
must
Channel
have
Islands.
better they had better balance back then than we do
I
now.
I suppose because I'll tell you, Mrs. Mills is really struggling getting up those stairs. She moves quite a bit faster later in this movie. But yeah. Grace uh, ducks into her kid's room and she asks for her daughter's forgiveness while she's sleeping. And it's revealed that Anne was actually awake and listening the whole time because, of course, she's a little shit and she doesn't want to give her mother the satisfaction. Um, and she kind of gives her a kiss and goes to leave the room, and Nicholas is awake and asks about his father, asks if he's coming back and why he went off to war. And yeah, yeah, that's awful.
Yeah,
Uh, and we've got Grace like just on the ground, just weeping for her husband. But then she starts to hear the piano playing in the distance.
creepy.
So she grabs her lamp and the shotgun and she heads down to investigate. And of course, it stops when she opens the door to the music room. And of course, there's nobody there. And after she steps inside, the door closes behind her. So she hurriedly goes over to the piano. Uh, she flips down the key cover, locks it, and steps out of the room. And she's experimenting with the door swing. Like, okay, there's clearly it's an old house. There's just something wrong with it. Right. There's got to be a
You gotta
rational
rationalize it.
explanation. Yeah, you know it. We're enlightened. And then of course she ends up with the door slamming in her face and knocking her on her ass. And the shotgun goes off on the floor, or it doesn't go off, I mean, but drops out of her hand. And yeah. So the doors to the music room, they're locked, and she doesn't have her set of keys with her in that moment, which is weird and dumb on her part, especially given that she's like continuing to search the house and whatnot, right? So she calls for Mrs. Mills and her set of keys, and they open the doors to an empty room, and the piano lid open again. And yeah, snap cut to the kitchen where the two are attempting to de-stress. And Mills, this is the first time that Mills is like pushing drugs on Grace, as Grace just kind of rambles on about the situation. And Mrs. Mills thinks that the world of the living and the dead can become kind of mixed up from time to time. And Grace's faith, nope, that can't happen. That only happens at the end of all time. It's nope, can't believe such things. And I've got here in my notes, this is kind of the crux of the entire movie.
Oh, 100%.
It's her inability to reconcile what she is seeing and experiencing with all of her senses here, and yeah, just letting dogma blind her at that point. um
Also her
so
questioning Mills about the pills and everything like that, and, like, her suspicion of Mills ramps
yeah.
up at this point because she already had a little bit, but it ramps up at this point, and she's like, "What are these?" Like, 'cause with the drugs, and she's like,
Mhm.
"These are your migraine pills that you always take," and shows her the bottle and everything like that.
Well, she shows her the bottle the second time she
Yeah,
pushes drugs on her. I think she kind of questions it here, but not to the degree that she does later,
yeah.
where she starts to actually understand that, oh, I'm kind of being gaslit here. Um, but yeah, apparently they've spoken through the night and now it's early morning because Grace was like, getting my coat. I'm going to go get that priest who never comes around anymore. And I'm going to ask him to come back and bless the house.
Yep.
And, Mrs. Mills tried to dissuade her because the fog is just so crazy thick. She's asking her to wait until the weather improves. And yeah, again, we got to stop here and talk about that fog because it is exquisite. It looks so real,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
real because technically it is. It's just composited with blue screen stuff. It's there's this great series of short making of videos that were clearly, just filmed with a handheld camcorder like VHS or whatever back in probably 99 or 2000 whenever this film was actually filmed. And you see like scenes of Tuttle with that great big pool out in the lawn behind him, but there's actually a fairly big blue screen behind him as he's raking leaves, and occasionally shots with crew members with fog machines pumping that through fans, but very little because great big open exterior space, you would need so
Oh
much
yeah.
smoke to make that happen. So ultimately, they constructed these, almost like a clean room on the one of the lots where they filmed this for exterior or interior shots, where it's just a big bunch of lumber constructing a bit of scaffolding with plastic sheeting like visqueen or whatever hung all the way around it so that they could pump a ton of that into those spaces and just film the fog. It's so
How
good.
uh, it amazes me to this day of how movies from back then with the blue and green screen are so much more realistic looking than that what we have now. Of like
Yeah,
it,
because everybody's got to make that digitally, right? And so it
right?
has that look.
It's the
And
lighting. It's the lighting of it
yeah.
because it has a soft feel to it
Mhm.
with with how the freaking VX and everything drives me crazy, that soft look, because you can tell on the edges they're all soft. And I'm just like, I hate that. I hate that. With this movie, that fog was seamless. It was gorgeous. It looked so unbelievably real. Her wandering around in the fog of just like it was
I
gorgeous.
know. Save
Freaking gorgeous.
for the part we're about to get to, uh, you would be totally forgiven for assuming that it was all completely real and filmed practically on those sets and on those
Mhm.
exteriors that way. It's
Like they just happened to find a perfect like time of day where they were filming in the morning or
Yep.
whatever. Oh,
And it's so funny because a lot of 4K Blu-rays will reveal from older films a lot of
mhm.
flaws in the effects. Ghostbusters, for example,
Yeah.
there's an extreme use of matte paintings in that film. And a lot of them, the edges, when you see it in 4K, are so crystal clear that you can see images bleeding through the edges of the matte paintings that, back in a VHS back in the day, you never would have seen
Oh God, no.
because, let alone a DVD at 480p. It's, just, it's, don't get me wrong, Ghostbusters still looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Just a really good looking movie, but some of the effects, you know, I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one, oof,
When she
it's
walks
it.
up to Tuttle and everybody when they're raking the leaves. I love
Mhm.
that scene. I love that scene because it just
Yep.
reveals so much more. Because, like you said, what the crux already happened, and so now we're going to be seeing more and more and more and more and more. And when she walks up to them, and
Yep.
she's like
Yep.
demanding,
Yeah. Hey, when we bought this house, they told us that there was a little cemetery on the grounds. Now, I think it might be over there. I
Mhm.
need you to check for me. I got to go get this priest. We're going to get, maybe an old priest and a young priest. I don't know. But we're going to make this priest thing happen. And while I'm gone, I want you to look. And he's like, sure thing, boss. Sure thing.
Love
And
it.
so she passes through the gate and down the wooded path to the road. But back at the ranch, Mrs. Mills speaks with Tuttle, and he asks her if it's a good idea to let her go, but she thinks the fog will keep her from getting very far. That ain't ominous. No. Um, and he also asks when she thinks it'll be okay to get everything out in the open. And she's like, all in good time. And then she says, speaking of which, and then she kind of gestures at the ground in front of them. The camera moves over and we see a tombstone sticking out of the pile of leaves that he
The
was
Celtic cross.
just standing at with Grace, that she didn't see because she's so,
She doesn't
in
want to
it.
see.
Exactly. Exactly. And Tuttle is like, oop. And he grabs a pile of leaves and throws them over the top of this thing. Because basically, that's been his whole shtick with all the raking of the leaves, covering up the gravestones
Yeah.
this entire time, just to be sure that things aren't revealed until this family is ready for things to be revealed.
I'm wondering
Uh,
if they don't want to reveal things too fast and too much because of the reaction of I'll mention it at the end once like all like comes to light of this, but like don't
yeah,
let me forget. But like I have a feeling of
I
why
know.
things are gonna flow.
I think there's so many theories a person could have about, what happened when and why people are reacting in certain ways throughout this movie. And I think we'll have to circle back to that at the end
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Um, so the fog is growing thicker and thicker as Grace heads down this path until she's completely swallowed by it.
She starts turning
Um,
around like a dumbass too. Of like,
oh,
if
I
you know
know.
anything about like, no, keep your eye
Keep
focused
going
forward.
straight.
You're gonna
Yes.
like veer off a little bit because naturally that's what you do, especially like in the desert and things like that. But she starts turning around like a dumbass, and I'm like, girl, no, you can't do that. Keep going forward.
Yeah, yep. And she hears some footsteps, and then it's revealed they belong to her husband, Charles, who just kind of pops out of the woodwork, so to
The
speak.
delightful Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, and
Oh,
he's this pre Doctor Who
I
Christopher
know.
Eccleston,
Before his
pre
like Agents of Shield,
pre, oh
pre
yeah,
28 days later,
28 days
right?
later. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, by about 3 years or so. He's come back to her, and she's like, "You're so different," and he says, "Sometimes I bleed."
it was so creepy when he said
The
that.
the fuck?
But so
It's
out of hand, like out of pocket. Of just
yeah.
like he's like, yes, blah 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 blah, and he's like, sometimes I bleed, and it's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. So she takes him back to the house and introduces him to Mrs. Mills. And, back in the day, we would have called this, or at least in that era, we would have called this shell shock because that
Yep,
came out of World War One, even.
yep.
But the concept of PTSD wasn't so much a thing. It was just, nope, you had a hard time with the war and you were a little affected by it. Um, but he greets his children in the creepiest way possible by just standing at the foot of their bed until he speaks to them. But yeah, they're still happy to see him. And of
Yeah.
course, Nicholas asks him if he killed anyone in the war,
Well, it's a
like a
standard
little
little
boy
boy.
would.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Even though we don't really see him playing with soldiers, and we can pretty well gather he's a good little boy.
yeah.
But
He's very sweet.
he does what his mother asks, and he's a good little boy. Um, but yeah, downstairs we've got Grace and Mrs. Mills busting ass in the kitchen trying to get a little lunch together for him. And, of course, Grace is just over the moon that he's back because, she's
That's what she's been waiting for this whole time.
yeah, she's never known for sure if he's been dead. It's she's had her suspicions that, he died and that just nobody was able to tell her because nobody knew. But yeah, finally getting, something of an answer and something her children have been waiting for all this time. Everything's coming up Grace right now, right? And then she hears a door upstairs and she calls up to Charles only for another door to close. Yeah, it's clear he's not coming down. And just the way her face falls, and yet she's still trying to keep up appearances for Mrs. Mills, just with the expression on her face. It's something. Um, and that night at dinner, Grace is explaining to her children that their father is not well She doesn't want to get into details of the PTSD or anything like that, but the kids, they ask about where people who die in war go, and she gives them like an overly simplistic answer of it
The
depending on
goodies and the
whether,
baddies.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
what's the goodies? Well, father fought for England, so obviously it's the goodies. She's like, how do you know though? Like, I love that the little girl's just like, well, how do you
uh-huh,
know? How, like, are
yeah.
they the goodies? Are they the bad? Like, how do you know?
Yeah, that's what I have here in my notes. Anne asks how you know who is whom. Good girl in parentheses, but Grace doesn't want to talk about it. When the little girl brings up the intruders, Grace shuts her down again, saying that there aren't any, and this enrages Anne after all they just went through over the past few days. Like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I
We
told
made
you
so
there
much
were people.
progress.
I know. Yeah, yeah. You didn't believe me. You punished the hell out of me. Then you finally believed me when you experienced it for yourself. And now all of a sudden you're saying no again? Yep. Fuck off, mom.
Yep.
Um, so Anne starts hyperventilating. And then, because she's got her arms crossed and she's screwing up her face in a little kid tantrum. But her mother commands her to stop breathing like that and repeating it, ultimately telling her to stop breathing. I have here in parentheses, knowing looks all around.
Oh yeah.
Um, and this actually comes back again later. Yeah. Yeah. Not just with what we ultimately find out, but there's a callback to this again. So Grace sends her to room without any dessert. And as Anne passes through the kitchen crying, Mrs. Mills stops her to comfort her, telling her, she's seen the intruders as well. And, well, fuck, she wants this woman to tell her mom, but Mrs. Mills says that she isn't ready to believe just yet.
Yep.
But given time, she'll see them too. And then surprises and changes are in store. Kind of ominous, but yeah. So team meeting in the shed about convincing the family of something. Um, Mrs. Mills thinks that Charles is a non-issue because of, the state that he's in. Because Tuttle's kind of worried about how he changes things. But no, Mills thinks we're fine. We're good. We got this. Let's just keep things moving along. Cut to the next day as Anne tries on her dress and veil for her first communion. Grace
Here's
wants,
costume change, by the way. Do you notice that?
yeah,
Everybody stays in the same clothes throughout the entire film. The kids are in their
yep,
pajamas and Grace is in that dress.
yep, yep. And Grace wants Anne to take it off so she can, shorten the sleeves and so that Anne doesn't get it dirty. But I mean, this little kid, she's elated. She even says she looks like a bride. She's never, probably worn anything quite as nice in quite some time, I would assume. And she wants some more time in it. She never gets to have any fun, right? Um, Grace gives the little girl a moment to play as she goes to check on Charles. And she's like, all right, no sitting on the floor. And I don't want you leaning up against the walls. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. I get it. The dress has to be perfect. I understand
Perfect in the eyes of God.
yeah. Yeah. I understand where they're all coming from, but come on, let her be a kid. Um,
That's the one thing about this movie that like drove me crazy is the mom never let them be children. You never got to see them playing besides the drawing of like
yep.
when they're at the table and everything. And it just drove me absolutely insane. I was like, they are children. I get that they're not allowed to be out in the sun and everything like that, but like at night or something in the evening, like she never let them have fun. She never let them be kids.
Yep.
She was like this reign of control at all times.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of that comes from the occupation as well.
Yeah.
Needing to keep her children safe, but it's just this is too much.
Yeah.
These kids need a little something. So she goes to check on Charles, who's still just completely inconsolable. He
Laying in bed, just
he
out of it.
won't even look at her. And the little girl is, playing with a puppet and humming to herself, sitting on that floor too, like she shouldn't be, just saying. And then when Grace returns, after, sitting outside the room for a little bit, I'm having a little cry there over the situation. She's like, okay, it's time to get the dress off there. We got to make this happen, and I don't want you ruining it. And she notices the hand of the little girl on the floor. It's looking a little old.
A little bit
And
wrinkly.
as she kind of circles around, um, she sees that it's an old lady in her daughter's dress and speaking with her daughter's voice. She's like, "What have you done to my daughter?" And we get the line from the trailer.
I
Are
was
you
gonna say that
mad?
exactly. The line from the trailer.
Yep.
I
Are
am
you
your
mad?
daughter.
I am your daughter. And so Grace attacks the old woman and throws her to the floor, ripping the dress, only to see that it was Anne all
In
along.
the
And
reflection of the mirror.
yep. And the little girl recoils in horror at her mother attacking her, perhaps remembering something from before as well. Um, Cut to Grace in the kitchen, splashing some water on her face, and Mrs. Mills telling her that she left Anne with her father because the little girl wanted to speak with him.
Yep.
And you can see the look on Grace's face like, oh, I did some dumb shit here and I'm in trouble now. And this is where Mrs. Mills again tries pushing pills on Grace. And this is where she shows her the little
Yep.
bottle. I think it was even the Anison brand of aspirin. Um, you can't quite see it, but it starts with an AN and it's like, okay, we see what you're doing here. Um, and she wants Grace to rest, saying that, she and the other servants know what has to be done in this really ominous way. And Grace is, like, what do you mean by that? And like, what do you mean you know what needs to be done? I know what needs to be done. And, it cut to her washing the pills down the sink. Um, and Mills, as Grace goes upstairs, to speak with Charles, Mrs. Mills is leading Anne out of the master bedroom, and everybody just stares daggers at each other. And yeah, Grace heads in and starts to, undress for bed. And Charles is like, Anne told me everything. And you see her kind of pause a
He
little
told me
bit.
she told me what happened. And
Yep.
like he says something else too, like it was very ominous what he said. He
Yep.
worded it so perfectly. He's like, they she told me what you did or something like that.
Yeah, which makes me wonder, had she spoken about the time when Mummy went mad, or was
I
it
think
a
she
more
did.
recent event?
Yeah, yeah, I think
And
she did.
it could be read
100%.
as either way. But
Yeah.
I also love as Grace goes to her wardrobe to undress, and it's a wardrobe with a mirrored door. We see the shot in the mirror as she swings it. We get the perspective go past as the door swings of Charles sitting on the bed. And it's just cool framing for everything. I think it's really
The
neat.
use of mirrors and candlelight is
Hmm.
brilliant because they use mirrors throughout this entire film
Yeah.
and like the light of the candle hitting them and everything. It's just it gets you into that mindset and that frame. Like, oh, gorgeous, fucking gorgeous. Like
Yeah.
brilliant directing, brilliant.
Really, really cool film from earlier this year. Shit, what was it called? It's like a prehistoric horror film that's all lit in natural light and firelight. Um, oh shit. Why can't I think of what it's called?
Who is
It's
it
a
in?
neat it was nobody.
No.
It was essentially a student film that got wide release. Um, shit. I can't think of what it's called. It's gonna drive me nuts, but I'll find it and let you know. Because holy crap, the lighting in that movie is fantastic. It's it's
Out
not
of
in cer
Darkness?
yes.
Okay, I got you.
Yes, it is
Very good Google.
so much fun. It's yeah, it's I with everything I'm juggling at the moment, I can't Google. I've even got a stream deck in my hand to make all this happen. But at the end of the day, yeah, Out of Darkness. Um It's something that kind of started as a student film and progressed to a feature, and the people who made it even created a language for the people in the film. It's just it's unique, and the lighting in the film just absolutely fantastic. And in rewatching this, I definitely had to think of that film, just because again, I understand not everything is completely firelight, not even in the others, but they do a good job
Yeah.
faking it, as opposed to things like we were talking about where you notice an offness to the
Yeah.
flickering or the angles of the lighting and all that. So yeah, well done. Well done.
Hmm.
Um, so Grace starts to tell Charles about what had happened earlier, but he stops her and asks about the time that Anne alluded to earlier in the story. And we get Anne and Nicholas talking to each other about it as well while Charles and Grace speak. And Charles tells Grace that it's, not him that needs to forgive her, but the children. And then he gets up to leave. He's got his coat in his hand and everything. Um, and Grace asks him where he's going, and he tells her back to the front. And he'd only come home to, say goodbye to her and his family. And Grace is like, the war is over. What do you mean going back to the front? And he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've got some issues here. She collapses on the bed, telling him that he left because he wanted to leave her, and essentially just go. Then just go, and this is what you always wanted. Just go. And Charles kind of snuggles up with her. And then we get sexy times because between two incredibly attractive people, and
In
fading
this
to
movie, we gotta have sexy times.
yeah, and
I think
fading
it's written into her
and
contract.
yeah, it's very tame though, and it fades to them lying face to face in bed, Grace sleeping, but Charles just staring at her, and we cut to his voiceover of "Forgive me, Grace," and then he just fucking disappears.
Yeah.
Um, he's gone. No more Charles. Daddy left. And she wakes up to no one there, and she walks to the gate, just despondent. And it's like one of the rare gifts that you can find for this movie is her just standing there at the gate with her head against the bars and her hair kind of blowing in the wind around her. And yeah, it's sad.
It's
But
so sad.
meanwhile, meanwhile, the children wake up to no fucking curtains and entirely
The
too much light coming
screaming.
in the room,
The
and they
screaming.
start shrieking bloody
Oh my
murder.
god.
No curtains, I have in all caps. And Grace throws her house coat over the children and kind of ferries them from room to room, looking for shade somewhere. And I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be an interior room, a water closet, something. Stuff them
Basement.
in a
Anything.
closet. And she ends up putting them inside of a wardrobe in a bedroom somewhere. And, they're crying for their father. Um, and, after she tells them he's gone, Nicholas gives her a great big hug, and she reaches out for Anne, but Anne just recoils at her touch and just tells her point blank, find the curtains. Just,
I love that
mom,
shit.
mom, you got to stay on task here. You got to find the curtains. So Grace is like shaking Lydia, trying to get an answer out of her, trying to get her to speak.
She
And
starts stuttering
yeah,
a little
Lydia's
bit.
like trying to respond, and she's like, nope, nope, here's a pen. Do that instead. And she like goes to try to write something, but this is where Mrs. Mills steps in, and she's like, she can't write either. Again, with the fucking gaslighting. I'm sure she can write just fine. Um, but Mills, yes, she is shocked that the curtains are gone, but she really doesn't seem concerned about the children. She's
She
like,
warned her before about the curtains. She really
yep,
did. She's like, "Hey, the curtains are gonna they're poof."
yep. And, she says, hey, their condition's probably improved. It's okay. To
And
which
then
Grace
Tuttle,
is like, the fuck you say? She just can't believe what she's hearing. And,
yeah,
and Tuttle walks in and he's like, yeah, I had a sister who had, arthritis. And, one day suddenly it just wasn't there anymore. We're good. Everything's cool. We're all right. Everything's all right.
maybe you should test it out. Maybe see if the sun actually does hurt them again. I don't know.
Yeah, because that sounds like a great idea, at least to Grace. She can't believe what she's hearing. She sets off to find the curtains, telling them, you're all going to help me hang these curtains, and then you're gone. Which is such a yeah wealthy landowner with servants type of perspective. You're going to do the rest of your job, and then you're fired.
That drove me crazy, the entitlement from her. She's like, "You're gonna
Oh
do
yeah. Yep. Yep. So they're less than helpful. And Grace ends up getting the keys from Mrs. Mills back
at
at
gunpoint."
gunpoint. Yeah. And she sends them packing. Um, and as they step outside, they're like, well, better go uncover the gravestones because they're
They're
in
like,
their end game now.
"Yep." They're like, "We're done. We're done. It's time for some hard love."
Yeah. There's going to be some hard truths discussed here. So Grace is kind of tossing the house, searching for the curtains, and the kids are arguing with each other. Um, and they're back in their bedroom. It's nighttime at this point, and Anne's like, "I'm going to go search the woods for Daddy,"
Yep.
and her plan is to climb down the downspout, on the side of the house. So she's got to climb along a window ledge to get to this thing, but little kid logic, they're fine.
They got
And she
bones and
does,
rubber.
yeah, they'll be okay. They bounce. It's not concrete down below. It's just grass, right? It's so ultimately she gets down and then all of a sudden Nicholas wants to come with her and she, is like, okay, that's because you're a fucking scaredy cat.
Oh yeah.
It's you just want to come with me because you don't want to be alone. And she's like, and he's all, no, I want to look for Dad too. And so he comes with.
He's
Um,
5. He's
I
terrified.
know.
There's
I
shit
know.
going on. He doesn't understand. He's like, "Don't leave me."
And can you blame him?
No,
Honestly.
not at all.
Just from the very first interaction with Victor onwards, come on.
God.
There's a little ghost boy touching my cheek. It's
And his sister making it worse of like, yeah, just like teasing him and mocking him the
yeah.
entire time and playing pranks and
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So this is where Grace thinks to check the attic bedroom in case, Mrs. Mills stashed the curtains up there. And the kids are kind of getting turned around outside. I love how Nicholas thinks that they're lost and they're in like the front fucking lawn. It's you're not lost. You're
Well, she
just
never left him outside. Like that makes
yeah, I guess. You're not necessarily lost. You just don't really know where to look.
yeah.
And this is where the children happen upon the gravestones. And Nicholas doesn't want to approach because he's afraid of ghosts. Back upstairs, Grace finds that postmortem photography album and flips through it far enough to find the picture of Mills, Tuttle, and Lydia.
Mhm.
And I think the back of the photo is like 1891 or something like that.
And it says tuberculosis on it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's at this moment that Anne finds Bertha Mills' name on the tombstone and gets back up and looks around to find the trio approaching, walking up behind her little brother. And, at first, he won't believe his sister that they're dead, but does finally come to his senses. And I love what she says too. It's something about, I thought you said they're not ghosts. And she's like, they're dead.
Yeah.
That
I
was the
love
phrase she used.
I love that they use the Celtic cross for her for Mills's because she has the Irish lilt. And that little
Yep.
bit of, like, extraness to that film was brilliant, brilliant.
Yep. Yep. Works for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, Nicholas does come to his senses and runs off with his sister back to the house. And Grace, I think, had seen them all outside the kid's bedroom window because she went to go get them as soon as she found the photo. Um, and
Open the
then
window and everything so they don't
Yeah.
come.
Yep. And so she's already running out the front door with the shotgun. They're running up the steps. She tells them to get inside the house and she levels the shotgun at the trio, threatening them to stay back. They keep advancing, and one at a time, she unloads both barrels, but to no effect. She runs back in and locks the door. She tells the kids to run upstairs and hide. Mrs. Mills speaks to her through the door, telling her that she must learn to live with their new situation, both the living and the dead together. Grace screams at her to leave her in peace. And I love how, as the three are standing um, outside of these glass doors, it's almost like they're partially like coming through them,
Yeah,
just the way it's
it
lit.
was so
They're,
creepy.
they're clearly on the outside, but it looks like maybe kind of not
It
too.
was, like, phasey almost, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And it would have been really cheap to have them just walk through.
Yeah. When I first watched it, I was like and then rewatched it again, I was like, couldn't remember if they actually phased through or not, and I'm really glad they chose not to do that
Yeah.
because it gave more structure to
Yeah,
that scene, I would say, that if they phased through, it'd been like it it would've
I
cheapened
know.
it. It would've
And
cheapened it.
yeah, it would have felt extra cheap. And they've set up throughout this entire film that these are very, very physical beings.
Yeah.
They're touching stuff, they're handling stuff, they're serving food, they're doing all these things.
Eating
And they
it,
have,
another
yeah,
question.
that too.
It was
Yeah.
rare when they actually ate food, like, when the with the toast, and during dinner, they never actually ate, only Miss Mills had some of the soup. It was really, like, subtle how they did
Yeah.
that.
So, yeah, the kids hide in their wardrobe. Mrs. Mills
Another
tells
great
Grace.
use of mirrors.
Yep. Yep. Mrs. Mills tells Grace that sooner or later the intruders will find them. And then Tuttle says that they were the ones that took down the curtains, the intruders. And back upstairs, Anne wants to take a look at things. Nicholas wants her to stay put with him. He starts to hyperventilate here. And this is where she tells him to stop breathing like that. Stop breathing like that. Stop breathing. Sound familiar?
Of course.
And and again, I think this all ties into what actually happened to them. But guess what? The old woman, the old blind woman has found them. And she's pretty spooky appearing at the wardrobe door here. They scream, of course, like you do.
She's
Uh,
blind and she's creepy. Her eyes
yeah,
are all milky and
she,
and just
I
like
know she looks like an old hag, right? It's,
it was
what
the
happens?
actress's last role before
Oh,
she died.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, sooner or later we all go into the fertilizer business, but, um, yeah, yeah, that's oof.
Yeah.
Mrs. Mills and Tuttle tell Grace that the intruders have found the children and that there's nothing they can do now. Grace will need to go upstairs to talk to them. So, sort of implying that they've always been there to help is as maybe poorly handled. I don't know if it was even poorly handled. I think it was more that just Grace being the kind of person that she was made it difficult for the subject to really be broached between Mills and Grace.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Grace is terrified, but she takes the advice that she gave her son and she grips her rosary tight while, repeating the Our Father as she ascends the stairs. And she makes her way to this upper room where she hears voices on the other side of the door. And she opens the door on a seance in progress. And yeah, I don't know in first viewing that I expected this to be what she would find when she opens the door. Um, and we've got, a clear indication that this old woman is actually a medium, and she's auto writing the answers to questions that she's posing to Anne and Nicholas. And she's got this gentleman with her who reads what she writes as she's doing all of this.
Yep.
And Nicholas is just terrified and, is telling his sister not to talk to her. And Anne thinks that she can kind of end things by answering the questions.
Yeah, because they're
And
asking like, "What happened to you? What happened to you? What happened to you?"
yeah. And Anne walks up and whispers in the lady's ear. And the medium surmises that the children were smothered with a pillow, but the kids don't actually want to hear that. And it's so weird because
They know,
Anne
and knows what
tells her,
happened. Yeah, and
but
knows what
she
happened, but the realization,
that they're actually dead.
yeah,
Yeah.
she just thought
And
like basically their mom attacked them, but they were still alive.
yep. And here we are that they're screaming that they're not dead. And the lady keeps writing over and over, not dead,
We're not
not
dead.
dead,
We're not
not
dead.
dead.
We're not dead. Yeah.
Yep. And Grace has enough at this point, and she runs over and starts shaking the table and ripping up the paper. And we see this both from her perspective and from the participants of the seance, where there is nobody there. The table's shaking, the paper's in the air, ripping itself apart. Yeah.
I want another movie by the same director from the other viewpoint. I think it would be amazing, absolutely amazing from the other viewpoint, because the actor and like the actress who's the living mom of Victor
Mhm.
is freaking Catelyn Stark.
That's true.
So like she could they could redo her, like redo this entire thing with her because she still looks phenomenal. And
Oh,
like
yeah.
just like have the alternate, because like has this ever been done in Hollywood, an alternate view of one of these ghost movies? Like, releasing them like, they shouldn't release them so far apart, but, like, I think it would be freaking brilliant, because we do it in games, and we do it in other movies of, like,
Yeah.
telling, like, "Oh, this other person's viewpoint during, like, these things that happened in this movie." Like, vantage point of, like, going from each vantage point of every character.
Yeah.
Why couldn't we do that with a ghost movie?
That
I
could be
think that'd be
fun.
brilliant and
I
fun.
think it would be fun to do it with a completely different story,
Ooh,
but um I don't necessarily want to see this revisited. In fact, as I was reading a little bit about this, I saw that there was an attempt to remake this
I saw
back in
that too.
2020. That makes me sad.
We
Yeah,
need to stop doing remakes.
I'm not anti-remake. It's just that when it feels like a cash grab or it just
Yeah,
doesn't play out well, then I'm extra sad.
yeah.
But, if it's something that adds something to it, if it's something that gives its own fresh take, then that's fine.
Like, Ocean's 11, how they redid it from the '60s
Yeah.
to now. Yeah, that was
Yeah. That
great.
was tons of fun.
Italian
Yeah.
Job, even though it wasn't, like, the bestest, but still they
Yeah.
redid it and made it their
Hell,
own.
even fucking Suspiria,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
remake of that is its own movie. It is
yeah,
its own kind of unique story too, and
yeah.
it's really well done.
Mhm.
So yeah, absolutely. I'm not against remakes. I'm not against reboots of things. But as soon as I heard about Train to New York, doing Train to Busan, you better bring it.
Yeah,
You better bring it because that film is way too recent.
so
And
good. It's so
all
good.
I know, it's one of the best recent zombie films. Really, it's just it feels so cash grabby, and that's
It's
just
like, "Oh,
because
they
I'm
redid it, let
jaded.
the right one in. Let the right one
I
in."
know, which
Like, they
has its own merits, but
they trailed too far from the book, and
yeah.
the Swedish version stayed pretty
Oh
like,
yeah,
close, and it was great, and
and that
especially
book
when
is
they
fucking disturbing. Yeah,
oh god, yeah, I own
the
it, I
stuff
love
that
that
got
book.
left out. Ooh.
Oh, they needed
Oh
to leave
yeah,
it out, because I don't think
yeah.
anybody could have handled it when they made that
No,
movie.
that would not translate well to a lot
No.
of Western audience. Well, just really any
So, like,
audiences.
the androgyny of the main character was a big point. That character was meant to be androgynous, and they casted perfectly in the Swedish one. And
Oh
then
yeah,
and then especially with, like, the bullying of Oscar and everything,
Mm-hmm.
it did not translate well to the Americanized version of Oscar. Like the bullying was like meh, well, like compared to what they
Yeah.
did to him in the Swedish version. And then I don't like how who they casted for. No, no, she wasn't. She was very, very, very not androgynous, and
Oh yeah, Chloe Grace Moritz. Yeah, no.
they
Oh,
needed a very androgynous, and they casted perfectly for the Swedish version of the
yeah, she's a great actress. It's just that wasn't
no
right for her.
or
I
Carrie
think
for that matter.
the oh god, was it Cody Smith McPhee that plays the little boy in the American version?
The kid from Hugo, right? Was it him? I don't remember.
Maybe. Shit, but I think that was okay because it was one of those child actors who's kind of a whiny
Yeah.
child actor. I think it's the same kid from The Road. Um,
Oh, it might have been he. Yeah, you're right.
but yeah, did you ever see the TV show?
No, I don't want to.
Yeah, I haven't either, but I haven't really heard anything one way or the other about it. I was just curious. Um, but yeah, yeah, it just
It didn't translate. And translating from like foreign films that are freaking perfect, perfect in my opinion.
yeah,
If you don't do honestly, it's the rare case of where if you don't do a shot for shot, it doesn't hit.
yep.
Because they just it doesn't. Like The Grudge,
Or
dude, The
mm,
Grudge was good, terrified me. I watched the OG one, or like Ringu. Mm. I love The Ring. The Ring was great. I do
yep,
like the
it's very
American.
much its own thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the best remakes that came out of the J horror boom.
Yep.
Um,
But they casted well,
oh yeah,
and
oh
that's
yeah,
key too.
yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, that one's great. We are way off topic at
Sorry.
this
I know, I
point,
know.
but I
Okay.
do appreciate this
Seance.
conversation. Yeah,
Seance.
so the
Children
seance is
screaming. We're
done.
not dead. We're not dead. Grace is ripping up things.
Yep, yep. So seance is wrapped up. The new owners of the house discuss what just transpired, and it's clear that the missus is done with her husband's bullshit. She's out. She
Yep.
says, you know, she's had enough of doing it
They
his
don't want
way.
us here. They don't want us here. We're done. We're leaving.
Yep. Yep. And so, yeah, he's like, okay, tomorrow we'll leave. And we cut to the hallway outside where Grace, you know, she's, uh, well, actually, no, before that, even,
She comes to realization of what she did.
yeah, before even she does, though, it's explained. Yeah, the lady went mad. She smothered her children and then she shot herself. You know, this is the wife saying this to her husband. The lady's concerned about her son Victor. It is confirmed these are the parents at that point. So then, yeah,
Which
now
calls
we've
back, by the way, because she shot herself. It calls back to when she was loading up that shotgun earlier and she
mhm,
hesitated, like she was having deja vu because she
yeah,
stopped while she was loading it and like her face and everything, like it was really weird when she was loading that shotgun of like,
yeah.
what?
I
Yeah.
personally think there's the possibility that her snapping awake screaming at the very beginning of the
Yep.
film
It
is
was a
her
nightmare of
coming
doing that.
to, well, not necessarily a nightmare of doing that, but possibly her snapping into her new existence from the act
Ooh.
of actually, and there's things to say that potentially no, that's not the case, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad theory that this is her entrance to the afterlife.
Maybe she wakes up like that every single day, not realizing time has passed because the children never age. So maybe she just wakes up every day like that.
Maybe it's not actually 1945 anymore. Maybe it's the 50s. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Because the kids, they
But
were definitely dressed like the late 50s, the mom and everybody.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, we've got Grace and the children huddling together out in the hallway as she finally understands what she did to them. She had killed them, turned the gun on herself, only to find nothing happened. The kids were laughing and playing.
Yep.
She thought God had given her another chance, but now that she knows what she knows, and she just kind of trails off, and Mrs. Mills steps into the hall and says that Lydia had said the same thing after the three of them had died and come to terms with being ghosts.
When they
And that's
figured
when
it
she
out.
stopped talking.
Oh, poor Lydia.
I know and Grace has no idea what to do at this point, but Mills just offers to make them tea and says, and I love these lines here. The intruders are leaving, but others will come. Now, sometimes we'll sense them, other times we won't, but that's the way it's always been, ma'am. And this is where the children also realize that their father, he died in the war.
Yeah, the
And
bleeding comet, whole 9 yards.
they ask Grace if they'll ever see him again. She doesn't know. Her faith is pretty rattled at this point by this experience. She doesn't know what to believe. She admits she doesn't even know if there's a limbo. And she says to her kids, I'm no wiser than you are. What she does know is that she loves them. She's always loved them. And this house is fucking theirs.
Yep.
And we get the mantra of the house is ours echoing through the walls of the manor as daylight approaches. And we get the kids stepping into daylight for the first time without pain as Grace observes the family leaving below. And
Victor.
Grace and the children, they're framed in the upper window and they fade into darkness. And down below, Victor is looking up at them because, of course, only he can see them because,
The innocence
of
of a
course,
child.
exactly, little kids can see ghosts. And the family drives off in their Bentley as a man closes and locks the front gate with a new for sale sign attached and credits.
Okay,
It's just,
it's
yeah.
so good. So I think, bring it back to because I actually remembered they were trying to ease Grace into this. Do you think that they had to do that so she wouldn't become a poltergeist versus accepting it versus being an angry, angry ghost?
Possibly.
Because it
Because
could go either
clearly, as
way.
physical as they are, she
Yeah.
was able to, toss that table around and rip
Yeah.
up the paper and everything. But there were moments where, like, she closes the lid for the piano, but then comes back and it's opened again. It's, things like that. It's, yeah,
Yeah.
like how much
Also, if you
control do
lived
they
there,
actually have?
and you kept getting annoyed by all the doors being locked all the time, I'm like, God damn it, I didn't lock this door. Why is this door locked? Like all the doors, like the amount of irritation because they kept locking doors. Like they were
50
almost
doors with 15 keys.
yeah.
It's,
I'm like, they were almost freaking like, why isn't there a master key? For goodness sake, that drove me nuts. Because like in those
yeah.
old houses, there the skeleton keys, there's a master key.
Yeah, yeah. It would be, at that point, that new family would be like, we're calling a locksmith. We're
Yeah.
getting somebody out to change the fucking locks. We're
That would have
having
been a good
one key.
That would have been hilarious if she tried her key and realized
And
that
it
the locks were
didn't
changed.
work.
That would have been
Yeah,
fascinating.
that'd be good. Um, so the thing about her snapping awake in the beginning was something I definitely wanted to bring up. All
Yeah.
the times that things having to do with smothering or not being able to breathe or being
Don't breathe.
told
Don't
not to
breathe.
breathe.
Oh my God.
Stop breathing like that. Stop breathing.
Yeah. Dude, I
I
remember we
mean,
watched this and we were like, we figured it out like right before the end. Me and my mom, at least I did as a kid. But like it took a while because it's one of those movies that I'm always looking for whatever of like who done it or the twist. I always do that. My brain just that's how it works. I
sure.
remember I didn't do it with this movie because it was so captivating. How the story was told, how the characters were brought out, and the character development. It got you involved. You were following along with them at their pace versus skipping ahead. And I love that movie for that reason. It's such a good movie. Such a good movie.
Yeah,
It's
it's well paced. It doesn't
yeah,
feel slow, which is something that, it's not the oldest movie in the world. It's only barely over 20 years old.
yeah.
But it's so easy to look at a movie from a couple of decades ago and say, that old movie is just so slowly paced. Oh no, this movie moves right
Yep.
along. Um,
You're enraptured
it,
the whole
it
time.
works. Yeah. I'm trying to think of any of the other little bits and bobs of foreshadowing that, but so much of it just comes down to a specific phrase, a way that something is said. It's,
Mills
watch.
phrases everything.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's, oh God, what a knockout performance from her.
Yeah.
It's,
I love the scene where her hair is down.
yeah. Yeah.
That
I think
stuck
that's
out
kind of
to
cool
me.
too.
Yeah, because her hair is always up. She's always like in her like proper, like, I'm like here to
Hmm.
help you. I'm here to cook. I'm here to be the housekeeper, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
And
and
then
it's the
one
whole
scene,
thing of the head of the house staff,
yep,
the head housekeeper would be referred to as Mrs., even though she isn't necessarily married. That
yep,
is more of a title that confirms status, right?
yep,
And yeah, I love how that's used throughout. It's cool.
yeah. Oh,
It's really cool.
I love it all.
And
I love all of it. It was so good. It was so good. All of
yeah,
their
poor
acting.
poor Lydia doesn't get enough to do in this
Yeah.
movie, but
When
I
Rich
get
is
it.
shaking her, oh my God.
Oh yeah, yeah. She
And she's
emotes
like
pretty well in
trying to
that
stutter.
scene. Yeah. It's so sad. It's
And Christopher
ah,
Eccleston with his like post traumatic, he did really well.
oh
Like
yeah.
I loved it. He had very few lines, but he conveyed all of that perfectly. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's God, yeah,
I feel like
there's very little that I have to complain about with this
yeah,
film. It's
this is one of those scary movies that you can show your younger child to because it's not too scary. There's
nope.
no blood. There's no nothing. Even the sex scene was very, very like very subtle. No boobies, nothing like that.
Yep.
If you want to introduce your child to like scary movies because they're like, I want to watch a scary movie, blah blah blah. It's perfect because it's also I don't think it would like if they're the right age, won't cause nightmares or whatever like that. It's very good. It's very good.
Yeah, this would be a good one for somebody after they see something Charles Dickens related. Um, I think that would be, hey, you liked that. Do you want to see a scary movie that kind of feels like that?
Yeah.
It's yeah, yeah, it's yeah, this would be a good gateway film. Unfortunately, I grew up in an era where my gateway films were movies like Pet Cemetery, the Mary Lambert version, and Alien, and
Yep.
you know,
Alien. I remember
Pet.
watching Aliens in a
Mm,
on a tiny little VHS TV, and my brother had borrowed the VHS from somebody in high school, and I was in middle school. And like, and my development was like very slow because I was very, very sheltered in my religious household, and we were not supposed to be watching a rated R movie. And
mm.
we were on like the other side of the house because our house was shaped like an L, and we could hear when
Yeah.
people were walking up, and we were supposed to be doing Bible study during that time.
Ah,
So we put this movie in, and he's like, "Okay, there's only one spot I need you to turn away for." It was the chess person scene when they found that woman in like the.
okay. Yep.
So like we're watching this film, and I fell in love with Alien, the whole all of it immediately at that point, and that started my whole thing of like. I love these movies. I love scary movies. And then my parents started relaxing in their older age as I got older, like after 18 or so. We
Mhm.
started watching radar movies all of a sudden, and my mom was obsessed with scary movies and all these other things. And I remember she bought
Nice.
we watched The Grudge, and I hated it. It was good. I hate it because it terrified me.
Mm.
Because the sound that the lady makes,
Oh
I
yeah, the
I
throat
I
rattle.
I
Yeah.
can't do it. I can't do it. Even to this day, when people are like, "Oh, haha, we're gonna like fuck with you to do that," I'm like, "Nope." Immediately plug in my ears. I cannot do it. After she bought that movie, started having nightmares in the house. As an adult, having nightmares. So I stole her DVD and like broke it and threw it in the fire because I was like, "I'm not." Mm-mm. Nightmares ended, by the way, after I
Oh,
did that.
well,
So it was like maybe
cursed
pseudo.
DVD.
It was either a cursed DVD or like pseudo or whatever, and I felt
Yeah.
fine and safe again. But like, yeah. But I remember Stir of Echoes.
Okay.
Stir of Echoes was top notch for me and my mom. I love that movie so much. The use of music in
Yeah.
that was brilliant. Paint It Black, and
Yep.
like he kept
That's
saying
just what I was
Stir.
thinking. I think that was the film that started my obsession with that song.
Yeah.
Um, yep. Very cool.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of gateway horror was late 80s, early 90s sleepovers. And of course, what
Mhm.
are you going to do? You're going to run a bunch of scary movies from the video store and you're going to stay up all night scaring the shit out of each other watching these really inappropriate films. And Pet Cemetery, the Mary Lambert one is fantastic. I
Yeah,
love that film so
yeah.
much. And I mean, hell, you got Herman Munster as the neighbor from across the street. What more could you ask for? But yeah, that movie was on heavy rotation at little kid sleepovers then throughout that time period. But yeah, that absolutely is what got me into that stuff. And somewhere around that time period, again, late 80s, early 90s is when I got obsessed with the Alien films. And I made my dad take me to Alien 3 at the theater. And let's see, that was like 91 or 92, something like that. So I would have been like 12 or 13 at the time. So absolutely would have had to make my dad take me because there's no way I would have gotten into that one on
I'm
my
one of the
own.
few
But
people who actually likes Alien 3.
oh, we've had
Yes,
this conversation.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, it's on par with the other 2 because of, studio interference, 100%. The script
Yep.
rewrites, everything. I mean, the original trailer saying it's being brought to Earth, and then it didn't happen.
I
Um,
know. They had all those great Dark Horse comics that
yeah,
did a continuation essentially of Newton Hicks, even though the characters in the comics were different names. And then Ripley coming back after the Earth has been overrun because of course cultists managed to steal some alien eggs and fuck everything up.
yeah,
Um yeah, Earth War was an interesting comic run. Um, but yeah, if you've never taken a look at the William Gibson screenplay, at least read the comic book adaptation of his screenplay, because very little of it made its way into Alien 3. It
yeah.
is a very different story.
What
Got
annoys me
space
most with
communists and
Alien
everything else.
with, like, Covenant did the same thing that Alien 3 did that was the big mistake. You killed characters off screen.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't learn, like, Ridley did not learn. That was, like, one of the biggest contentions of Alien 3 is, yeah, the reason they had to do it was, like, 1, with Michael Biehn, Bean, uh, he wanted more money, so they, like, cut him out, but with Newt,
Mhm.
she was too old. The actress was too old,
Yep.
and she was quitting acting because she became a, like, 3rd grade teacher. She was too old, so they couldn't bring her back because like, studio and everything and, like, rewrite, they waited too long. And so they killed them off screen, and that's, like, what made everybody so angry, which I agree, they should not have done
Yeah.
that.
I get that.
But they did it with Covenant and Elizabeth Shaw.
I know.
And that was the best part of Prometheus was Noomi Rapace as Elizabeth. Great freaking actress.
Yep.
Uh, uh, oh my god, I love her like Swedish freaking girl with the dragon tattoo. That
Yeah.
trilogy was amazing, amazing. I love those books; they were amazing.
Yep.
Um, and they did the same thing. I love David. David was great. Michael Fassbender, fabulous. But like, you killed somebody off screen that was the fan favorite.
Hmm.
He did the same thing as Alien 3, and you thought that this would be fine, and it did not be fine. It was not fine.
No.
Everybody hated it. And all Covenant was it was a slasher film in space. It
Yeah.
wasn't a thriller, it wasn't a horror, it was a slasher. It was basically Jason or Michael Myers in space.
And I'm fine with the slasher film in space, but
Not Alien.
I know.
That's the
Alien
thing.
should be more of a haunted house film in space,
Yes.
which is how I'm pretty sure Ridley Scott himself always described the original picture. It's,
Well, when everybody tries to, like, get me to compare Alien to Aliens, I'm like, "I can't. It's 2
they're
different genres."
exactly. They're both
One
horror,
is
but
this is a thriller, that's an 80s action.
yep.
You cannot compare them. They are completely different genres, different everything. You
Yep.
cannot compare them. They are in their own respective areas, and they're both phenomenal. And I can't, like,
Mhm.
I can't. Ooh,
Yep. At least with Alien 3, there's other versions that you can seek out that honestly are a little better than the theatrical version. That
but
actually have,
I love the
some more
actor who
from the
plays the
script.
doctor. I love the
Oh,
actor who plays
Charles
the
Dance
doctor.
is great. Yeah.
He's also in,
Yeah.
Last Action Hero, and I
Oh,
love that
yeah.
film. I'm still mad that that film did not get the love it deserved because Jurassic Park came out at the exact same time,
Yeah.
and it was Jurassic Park. How can you compete with that? You can't.
Well,
You can't.
and we all laud the John McTiernan trilogy of Predator, Die Hard, Hunt for Red October, but very rarely do people bring up Last
Last
Action
Action
Hero.
Hero,
I
which
know.
was it needs to be revisited, honestly. It needs a re-release or something, like, it was beautiful,
Well,
beautiful.
maybe somebody like Arrow or Vinegar Syndrome or somebody will put out a nice 4K disc at some point.
That'd be
There you
great. That'd
go.
be freaking great. Oh my god. I'm excited to see
Oh.
Romulus. I'm excited to see
Yeah,
Romulus.
me too. I'm down. I just got to wait till I'm back next week in
Yeah,
town. So, because there's no way my parents would ever go to see that.
yeah.
So,
I
is
actually,
what it is.
I was trying to find a friend here in town that actually is like an Alien fan, and none of them are. But I have one friend that likes scary movies, and I was like, she's like, I'll go with you. And I was like, all right, but I need you to understand, I am a hyper fan. And so I either am going to be so quiet during a movie, which has never been seen before, because I talk during movies and like not at the theater. And the only time I talk at the theater is like, oh my God, it's this actor. He's from this. That's the only thing, because my little autistic brain is just like Kevin Bacon of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Um, but it's one of those movies where I'm just gonna sit there and be like, don't look at me, don't talk to me, don't eat too loud. I'm in this. I'm in this.
Let me love this. Um,
Yes. And Fred
yeah,
Mike literally said, I'm gonna love it. So I'm like,
that's good to hear.
yeah.
Because,
Because it's
I
taking
mean,
place between Alien and Aliens, and they're using a lot of the like they're reconstructing all the old sets and
oh, yeah, the
sounds.
bunch of people that worked on the set of Aliens worked on this.
Yep, and
So,
that's what I'm
that's,
most excited about. That's why I loved Alien Isolation. They used the original audio, the original like sets, everything. It brought you back to that moment.
that visual language used
Mhm.
for signage within the first film was
Yeah.
used really heavily in Isolation, and
Yeah.
I expect to see a lot of that in this film. And just, like we talked about with Alvarez being the director, there will probably be
Mhm.
a level of brutality to this film that you have not seen in prior films in the franchise. That's a good thing to me.
Yeah.
What concerns me as far as how the film performs is reactions to the trailer that I got from other audience members sitting in the theater.
Yeah.
People,
I watched the micro trailer and I haven't watched any of the trailers since. And I do that with movies that I love. I refuse to watch the
I'm
trailer.
pretty sure it was the one of the longer red band trailers that
Yeah,
played
I won't
before
watch it.
one of the films that I saw. It might have been before Long Legs. Um, but ultimately, just the little snickers and like, really, they're doing this again that you hear from people around
Ugh,
in the theater. And I'm like, you don't get it.
you don't get
It's,
it.
I think they're doing this right.
Yeah.
It's,
I know that there's gonna be an Android. I don't know anything else. Um, I'm really hoping they don't end it like how they ended Covenant, of like the horror movie trope of
yeah.
I hate that
What
trope.
they
I hate that
did
trope.
with David in that film was, this continuation of what he was up to in the first one. He was a meddler, an experimenter.
He created he created the xenomorphs because
Yeah.
the creators, they started off with it. They wanted to do it and perfect it, and then David took with it and he ran. He ran with it. And he
Yep.
created them. And I like
And
that backstory, but like I don't like what they did at the end of the film of like, oh, the people you liked that survived? No, no. I hate that because they do that in like horror films and slasher films of like, oh look, he's back. Your character's dead. And it's just like I go to the movies, and it doesn't always have to have a happy ending, but you go to the movies to escape real life, and life is so shitty right now. I want a semi-happy, realistic ending.
yeah,
Give me
yeah,
like a
it's,
happy middle, happy middle.
I have the ending that I want out of Romulus, given the little bit that I know about, who some of the characters are to each other in the story. And it's just only on the most basic terms that I know this. But but yeah, I don't know if we'll actually get that,
I know. There's some things we
especially
hope we get.
Alvarez, you know.
Yeah. If they keep up with the female led, the protagonist is a
Mhm.
female, I'll be happy still. Because, like, every single one of them, it's a female protagonist, and
Pretty
I'm
sure
willing
that's
to
supposed to be the case.
good, good, because I love
Yep.
that because we don't get that, and, like, Ripley was, like, the star runner of that, because it was written for a
Yeah.
dude, and Sigourney
Yeah.
Weaver stepped in, and we're going off tracks, we started with the others, and we're going
Oh,
off
I know. I know. It's just, final bit about Alvarez and this alien film. I will say the dude has a very strong track record of female leads in his movies. So,
I
you know
love
what?
that.
You've got what's her butt in Evil Dead, who's essentially the
Yes.
possessed girl in the story who becomes the heroine of the film.
Mhm.
And then you've got the girl in Don't Breathe. And yeah, there you go. So,
I
and
loved the Evil Dead film, it was really good, both
yeah,
of them. Even, like, the last one, like, I didn't it
yeah.
was not as good as the first remake, but, like, it was still good.
Oh, I enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to seeing what that director does next. His prior film, if you've never seen The Hole in the Ground, fun little Irish horror film. It's a good time. It's a good time. But Beth, any final thoughts about the others?
It was beautifully acted. The emotion was conveyed perfectly with all the characters. It was the environment, the setting, the use of light, mirrors, everything. Absolutely beautiful. It brought you into that environment. You got attached to the characters. You would follow along on their journey. It was a beautiful storytelling. It was beautiful. It was perfect. Especially, like, I love how it all still stands up to this day with the effects and
Yeah.
everything else. It still stands to this day as a great freaking movie. Even on IMDb, it's like a 7.9. For a scary movie, that's
That's high
high.
praise on IMDb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's high.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm not the
Mm.
biggest fan of Nicole Kidman, but, like, this is one of her better films, honestly,
Mhm.
honestly.
Yep. I think that's definitely safe to say this is a high mark for her. Pretty sure she was nominated for a Golden Globe for this, and it's a shame that
Okay.
I don't believe she was nominated for an Oscar. But you
It's
know
rare
how
with horror it's rare with scary movies being nominated
oh
for
I
Oscars.
know. Look at oh God, what's her face from Hereditary?
Yep.
Completely snubbed that year, and
Toni Collette.
yes,
Yeah.
we love Toni Collette in this house.
Oh, 100%.
She
United
that
States Carol?
role. Oh yeah, that role though in Hereditary, the fact that she didn't get more love come award season is just mystifying to me. Um, because again, acted her ass off. It's mm.
Yeah,
But
Nicole Kidman was nominated for a Golden Globe for it.
okay,
Yeah, she didn't win though.
yeah,
They won a
yeah.
bunch of Saturn awards.
I mean, that doesn't shock me. It's and then I forget what the award is called in Spain, but yeah, it did very well there.
Yeah, it won that. It won for like which was rare, I think, for also for a scary movie.
Yeah. Well, it helps that it's a period film that it just it has the setting that it does. I think that's the kind of thing that people that are involved with different types of awards like this tend to eat up a little bit more. It's just those particular folks still have your old school film critic mentality when it comes to horror films.
Yeah.
They don't get genre cinema.
The only
And
ones that have won is Silence of the Lambs and Parasite for
yeah,
thrillers. Yeah.
yeah, it's and
Just like comedies. Comedies and horror are very, very overlooked
yep.
because they don't take it seriously. And it's just like, you should take it seriously.
Yeah, it's not always a dude in a rubber mask. It's
Yeah.
yep. And even some of those films actually have something to say. So,
100%. I do
you
love
know.
that this film played around with the same thing. I feel like M. Night Shyamalan took some of this with the outfits because they don't change outfits.
Yeah.
like, they stay in the pajamas the entire time or whatever they were wearing when the day they died. The same way with Sixth Sense. He only wore the outfits that he died like, the clothes that were there during the day that he died.
Mhm.
And I love that because it's so subtle. It's so subtle. The director did such a subtle, subtle thing with the entire film. It's
Yep.
brilliant. It was
It
brilliant.
works. It
Yeah.
works. Near perfect film, if not perfect. So much fun to talk about this one, Beth. I'm glad we finally got a chance to do this. This
Same.
was cool. I'm also glad that we were able to, kind of gush for a minute about other films because that's always fun too. It's, it's
We're
how
Alien
often.
Predator fans.
Yes, we are. It works. Um, yeah, yeah. If you'd like, where can people find you?
So I am Lady MacBeth across the board on everything. But Beth is spelled with Behth. And so it's LadyMacBehth. And I use that for everything for gaming, for Twitch. I haven't been twitching very much in the past year, but I'm hoping for a slight comeback. We'll see. But yeah, if you ever want to play games or anything like that, just hit me up. All my social media is the same thing. It's just Lady MacBeth. I felt it was easy just to use that across the board.
Sounds like a solid plan. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah,
And
thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll find something again to talk about
Oh,
before too
100%.
long. That's the beauty part of horror films. There's always something to
We need to
talk
have an
about.
alien anthology.
Oof. Yeah. Yeah. If Kind of Funny won't do it, we'll just have to do it ourselves. Uh,
Right?
we're gonna make this shit happen, Beth.
Um, I
Uh
bet we could get Mike on board.
yeah, we probably could.
Yeah.
Probably could. Yeah.
And Cool Greg and yeah, I bet we could get them on board and be like gushing about it. And if they don't reach out to me for if the kind of funny does it, I will be insulted. Insulted because they all know that I am the person to go to for that. Like that is my
Oh.
shtick.
I'm still waiting for Cool Greg to react to the news article that I sent him about Crawl 2 actually being a thing.
Oh my
Um,
god. I hope it's as good as the first. The first was actually pretty damn decent. I liked it.
it's a really good thriller.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good
I was
time.
shocked. I was shocked.
Yeah. Well, I
Ugh.
shouldn't be wouldn't be too shocked about that director. He's the one that gave us some cool French extremity films, and he's the one that directed High Tension.
Ooh, okay, yeah. That was good.
Yeah. Which I know there's some problematic stuff in that film, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's still a pretty taut thriller. So
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thanks again, Beth.
thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, well, this has been Murders with Mertens, a horror film podcast. Thank you for letting us tickle your ear holes. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are so inclined. I'll be back soon enough with another episode. But until next time, stay spoopy, everyone.